it goes back to the constant drip around Prince Andrew, allegations around him regarding his friendship with the late Jeffrey Epstein, the recent allegations at the end of last year around the alleged Chinese spy Yang Tenbo. It is just always quite negative, slightly murky stuff that swells around Andrew.
As you were just hearing in the news there have been these sensational developments in the Prince Andrew story, where evidence has emerged to suggest that Andrew apparently maintained contact with Jeffrey Epstein 2 months after he claimed to have ended contact with him. Emails between the two men have been revealed in a Financial Conduct Authority case involving the former boss of Barclays, Jess Stalley. He's appealing a ruling that saw him banned from the industry for misleading regulators about his relationship with convicted paedophile Jeffrey Epstein. In the emails, a member of the British family, British royal family, inverted commas, believed to be Andrew, told Jeffrey Epstein that they would place him more soon. Roya is the Times royal correspondent. This feels far from ideal. How has this come to light?
Well, it's come to light, as you've just mentioned, in court documents. But, it's far from ideal. It really is, I suppose, an issue of credibility, isn't it, for Prince Andrew? And that's always been the case for a long time.
But this is not a direct investigation into him either. It seems to be quite tangential.
It is, but he gave that interview to Newsnight, to Emily Maitlis, back in 2019. It was a disaster. But he made certain assertions in that, one of them being that he ended his contact with Jeffrey Epstein in 2010. We now know, from what seems to be what's come out in court papers, that was not the case. Why didn't he say that? And I think it goes back to the constant drip around Prince Andrew, allegations around him regarding his friendship with the late Jeffrey Epstein, the recent allegations at the end of last year around the alleged Chinese spy Yang Tenbo. It is just always quite negative, slightly murky stuff that swells around Andrew, which is why the King and other senior members of the royal family constantly stand by the decision that there's no way back to public life for him.
That does seem to be a common sense position. The story now, it just never seems to go away. And I guess there was that instinct straight away after that interview, as it felt like there was more. The public had that suspicion. How much further could he go, in a way, in being isolated from the royal family?
Well, as I reported at the end of last year, when all the sort of allegations came out around Yang Tenbo, as far as Buckingham Palace and the King feel, there isn't much more they can do to further isolate him. I mean, the King made the decision at the end of last year that Andrew was effectively uninvited from the family Christmas at Sandringham. So it was turkey for two at Royal Lodge with Fergie. That was a big step, because for the last 2 years before that, he had been included. What else can you do? He no longer uses his HRH styling, which the late Queen took away from him. The King can't get him out of Royal Lodge. He refuses to budge. There's not much more you can do beyond.
Why doesn't the King have that power?
Because Andrew has the lease with the Crown Estate, not directly with the King, and that's got another decades left to run. And the King's done his best to brief against his brother and say, please move to Frobwell Cottage, it's more appropriate. But he's not going anywhere. So, as far as the palace and the King feel, they've done all they can to put an ocean between the institution and Andrew, who is no longer a working royal.
But, I mean, we've also had the 2 films lately. It does feel like it is unlikely that there will be a third film, but it does feel like this might give way to further journalistic intrigue in what went on.
Look, I think, as you can see from today's story and David Brown's reporting and all of our other reporting, there is constant journalistic intrigue around Prince Andrew. And it may be there's lots more to find out. The problem for the royal family is, as the King has previously indicated, the feeling is it's a sort of spectre that continually rears its head and never quite goes away. And so for that reason, really, the King just hopes that Prince Andrew will lead a very quiet life going forwards and these kind of revelations will stop, but it's unlikely to.
I mean, from the public's point of view, is there a point where we hit the bottom of the market for Andrew a while ago? So if this allegation, or this seems to suggest that he wasn't fully honest, isn't that something that most people, or a lot of people, thought for some time already?
It may well be that is the public's opinion. That's already baked into their assessment of the royal family. But as you can see from how well those stories on Andrew are doing on the Times website today, there is still enormous interest in him.
So is the click-through rate for those stories higher than other things?
I am reliably informed by your producer. It's doing very well on the Times website today. So yes, whenever I write about Prince Andrew, which is not often, but regularly enough.
I mean, let's be honest, royal scandal is a byword for something that people will generally be interested in. I mean, there's another story in the Times Online at the moment saying that Prince Andrew had told close close aides that he regretted his Newsnight interview. It feels odd that, once people have made 2 films about an interview, that he's finally said, maybe that wasn't the best idea. I'd have thought after the first film, you might have gone, not my finest moment.
I think his regret kicked in almost immediately after the Queen removed all his patronages, told him to step back from working duties within days of that interview. I think his regret kicked in pretty quickly in 2019 and has continued ever since.
But, I suppose, she did take away his HRH status, but there was always that sense that she favoured him on some level. Is he even more isolated these days without that kind of protective cloak that she could wrap around him?
Yeah, I think so. Although, the Queen, towards the end of her reign, didn't let him do the public walk to church, and the King did for the last 2 years until the Chinese spy stuff came out. So there's always this sort of briefing that comes from the palace that the King still loves his brother as a brother, but there's family and there's the family business. And in terms of the family business, he's fired.
I mean, how, with the royal family being a pared-down entity as it is now, how much more important is it for them not to attract negative press? I mean, you look at people talk about the amount of people that now appear on the balcony. There's these attempts to re-engage Harry and Meghan. It feels like the people that are visible to the public need to be squeaky clean.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure there's a huge attempt by the palace to re-engage Harry and Meghan in public duties. There's always public interest in them. Of course, but the members of the royal family have always known that they come under closer scrutiny than almost any other public figure, alongside
But just the less of them that there are, the more squarely it falls on their shoulders.
Yeah, in terms of public scrutiny, maybe, but I think that's always been the case with the royal family. It's an institution that people continue to be fascinated by.
I just want to get your reaction to another story that's just gone up on the Times Online, is that a senior advisor to Prince Andrew has privately admitted to an alleged Chinese spy that the infamous Newsnight interview was hugely advised, which we have mentioned so far. I mean, why is this being released as news now? Is this one of those things that sometimes happens in the news cycle where they want to distract? Because it feels like the real story is that Prince Andrew has potentially been quite dishonest about when he cut contact with Jeffrey Epstein. My
understanding from having just read that piece is that has come out in the same tranche of court documents that the other story we talked about, which is why it's only just coming out now. I don't think it's great.
Is it that he admitted it to a Chinese spy, which is the...
But the interesting thing about Dominic Hampshire, though, is that he was not a close sort of palace advisor to Prince Andrew. The whole irony of that it was a complete disaster, is that anyone inside the palace, apart from Andrew's own private secretary, Amanda Thirsk, thought it was a dreadful idea and he shouldn't do it, including his press secretary at the time. He ignored all of them and went ahead and did it, which I think tells you everything you need to know about Prince Andrew's judgment.
And how frustrated will the palace be that this should have been a positive news week, of course? Was it this week or last week?
I think they'll be absolutely fine, because there's plenty of positive royal news coming in the Sunday Times, Jeff.
Give us a hint.
No, buy the paper. Have a look.
Just a little hook, something to...
Good scoop coming.
Good scoop coming this Sunday in the Sunday Times. OK, well, thanks very much for updating us there, Roya and Nikkah, the Times royal correspondent.